Thursday, November 14, 1970, Houston, Texas. 10,000 people crammed into the Sam Houston Coliseum to watch Elvis Presley perform. Master Sergeant Robert Hayes, 42, was seated in a wheelchair in the middle of the third row. 8 months prior, Robert had sustained injuries in Vietnam. His legs were damaged by shrapnel, yet he was still adjusting to his new circumstances. His first public appearance since returning home was tonight. Robert would remember what transpired during Elvis Presley's rendition of a specific song for the rest of his life, and it served as a reminder to everyone in attendance of what gratitude and respect look like. This is the tale of an action, a reaction, and the significance of recognizing sacrifice. Robert Hayes was anxious on November 14, 1970. It was the largest throng he has been in since before Vietnam. For someone who had spent the majority of the previous 8 months in hospitals and rehabilitation facilities, the noise, people, and activity were all too much to handle. Linda, his wife, sat next to him and held his hand. With gentle words, "We can leave any time you want," she said. "Simply state the word." Robert gave a headshake. "I'm all right. I'd like to be present." Linda had come up with the idea for this concert. She had witnessed Robert's depression and his struggle to find meaning in life after losing his legs. She purchased tickets as soon as she learned that Elvis would be visiting Houston. Elvis's music had long been a favorite of Robert's. This might be useful. Proud to serve his nation, Robert had joined the Army in 1967. He had led a platoon of young men through some of the most hazardous areas of the war during his 2 deployments in Vietnam. By March 15, 1970, he was out of luck. Near a mortar round had detonated. Both of his legs were ripped apart by shrapnel. Although they were unable to save his legs, the field medics had saved his life. They were both amputated above the knee. After being returned to the United States, Robert had undergone numerous operations and had been equipped for prosthetics, which he was still learning how to use. According to the doctors, the wheelchair was only temporary. Robert would be able to walk again with prostheses if he had adequate physical treatment. However, 8 months after losing his legs, Robert was still using a wheelchair, adjusting, and lamenting the person he once was. For an instant, Robert forgot about his legs, about Vietnam, and about everything else save the music. As the lights went down, the audience exploded, and Elvis took the stage. Elvis began with upbeat tunes that sent the audience into a frenzy. For the first time in weeks, Robert felt himself grinning. Elvis started to calm things down about 45 minutes into the performance. Elvis said, "Ladies and gentlemen," into the microphone. "Tonight, I want to do something unique. It means a lot to me, this next song. It's about America, heritage, and the meaning of this nation. I hope it has some significance for you as well." The opening notes of a medley that Elvis has been performing recently were played by the band. An old spiritual, a Confederate anthem, and a patriotic tune were all mixed into one potent arrangement. It was dubbed an American Trilogy by Elvis. Something changed in Robert as Elvis started singing. The song's lyrics discussed history, sacrifice, and the complex aspects of American identity. For the sake of this nation, Robert had lost his legs, bled, and fought. Currently, sitting in this, Robert experienced a feeling he hadn't had since before Vietnam as he listened to Elvis Presley sing about America in the arena. Pride. Robert raised his right palm to his forehead in a military salute without hesitation, acting out of sheer emotion and instinct. It was the kind of salute that comes naturally after years of service. Perfect form, sharp and precise. Robert sat with it in his wheelchair in the third row, giving a salute while Elvis performed. Elvis gazed down into the crowd while he was in the middle of a particularly moving verse. As usual, he made eye contact with spectators as he moved over the front rows. Then he looked at Robert, a wheelchair-bound man in full military uniform saluting. Elvis noticed the salute and the wheelchair. Noticed something in Robert's face that conveyed sacrifice, loss, and service. Elvis's voice rang out. He struggled on the lyrics for a moment. Even when tears began to fall down his cheeks, he continued to sing. Elvis never shed a tear while performing. He was too calm and too professional. However, this was not like the others. This veteran with the ideal salute, this man in a wheelchair. It shattered something inside Elvis. Elvis had spent 2 years in Germany during a period of peace while serving in the army. He had been lucky, had never witnessed conflict, and had never truly been in danger, but he knew men who had. He was aware of the meaning behind the uniform, and it meant the world to witness this veteran, who was obviously injured and altered by the war, give that salute. Elvis continued to sing, but he never took his eyes from Robert. Everyone in the front rows could see the tears streaming down Elvis's cheeks. His tone was heavy with emotion, with some notes nearly breaking. Nevertheless, he persevered, singing along with every line while keeping his eyes fixed on Robert. Elvis performed something he had never done in a concert as the song approached its peak and he came to the most potent part of the composition. Elvis eventually raised his own palm in a military gesture as the music grew around him while he continued to sing. Salute. It was clear and intentional, and it was aimed at Robert. In the third row, rock and roll legend Elvis Presley was applauding a wounded veteran. Robert's gaze expanded. This was unexpected. The song had affected him, so he had saluted. Due of his military. Because it seemed like the correct thing to do at the time, training became ingrained. He didn't think Elvis would notice. He had no idea that Elvis would return the salute. Elvis held his salute, and Robert held his. Additionally, the Sam Houston Coliseum was filled with music and emotion when two men held military salutes during the song's finale. The viewers had observed. When the front row spectators realized what was going on, they stopped talking. More people were aware that something significant was happening, and the hush returned to the gathering. 10,000 spectators were standing motionless by the song's last notes as Elvis and a veteran exchanged salutes in recognition of one another. As the song came to a finish, Elvis lowered his hand gently. Robert followed suit. Elvis stood staring at Robert for a long time, tears still running down his face. Then, in a modest but significant show of respect, Elvis nodded. Robert gave a nod in return. After another beat of silence, the audience began to applaud. It wasn't the typical yelling and applause. The applause was attentive, almost respectful. Many audience members were in tears as a result of what they had just seen. Elvis was obviously having trouble gathering his thoughts as he wiped his eyes. He whispered, "Thank you," into the microphone. "I appreciate your assistance. Thank you to everyone who has served." Elvis paused to gather his thoughts, then carried on with the performance. However, something had altered. The energy was different, more deliberate, more significant. Elvis appeared more engaged with the crowd and more present. Elvis asked his road manager, Joe Esposito, to locate the veteran in the wheelchair as soon as the show ended and he departed the stage. The man who saluted was in the third row. "I must meet him. Find him, please, and take him backstage." Joe located Robert and Linda in the audience. "Mr. Presley wants to meet both of you. Would you come backstage?" Robert was taken aback. "He's eager to meet me." Joe said he insisted. Joe and a few security guards assisted Robert in getting his wheelchair into the auditorium and into the backstage area. Elvis came over as soon as Robert and Linda entered his dressing room. "Thank you for returning, sir." Robert was at a loss for words. "I should be thanking you, Mr. Presley. To me, that salute and what you did meant the world." Elvis gave a headshake. "That salute was well-deserved. I saw what you had done for our nation when I saw you sitting there in your wheelchair and in your uniform. The salute was the least I could do." For around 20 minutes, they conversed. Robert was questioned by Elvis regarding his duty, Vietnam, and recuperation. Normally guarded, Robert opened out to Elvis in a way he hadn't done with many people since returning home. Elvis paid close attention while posing intelligent queries, demonstrating sincere curiosity and regard. Elvis said, "I want to give you something." He took one of his stage scarves out of a wardrobe, the recognizable cloths he would toss to concertgoers. However, this one was not like the others. Made of fine silk and embroidered with his initials in the corner, it was one of his favorites. Elvis said, "This is for you," and draped it over Robert's shoulders. "I appreciate what you gave up. I appreciate your service." Overwhelmed, Robert felt the scarf. "This is too much for me to handle. This is excessive." Elvis took a seat at eye level with Robert, who was in a wheelchair. He spoke in a low, almost fragile voice. "I have something to tell you. I was stationed in Germany throughout my time in the army, where I felt secure and at ease. I never witnessed fighting. I never experienced what you did. I've occasionally felt bad about that, as if I didn't truly serve because I never took a genuine risk. I experienced everything at once tonight when I saw you seated in that wheelchair with that salute. Thank you to men like you who did fight. It's a shame that I got away with it so easily. I have the utmost regard for the experiences you have had. I wasn't the only one that honored you with that salute. I was admitting that you did something I was never required to do. You made sacrifices that I never had to. I also wanted you to be aware of that. That makes sense to me. You are visible to me." Robert felt Elvis's hand on his shoulder. "You can indeed. You will too. I wish for you to possess it. I also want you to be aware of something. What counts is what you accomplished there, the men you led, and the service you provided. I am aware that returning home hasn't been simple. Your sacrifice is important, even if I know you're going through a lot. You are important." Robert began to cry, the first. Since losing his legs, he'd let himself cry. Linda sobbed as she grasped his hand. They were able to analyze their feelings because Elvis sat with them. "Mr. Presley, I've felt useless since coming home," Robert stated after gathering his thoughts. "As if I've changed as a man. As if I am no longer valuable. However, I felt noticed today when you saluted me in return and recognized my experiences. It gave me hope that I might still be valuable." Elvis had a firm voice. "You are valuable. You are valuable. You are a hero. Never forget that." That evening, Linda and Robert went backstage with more than just a scarf. They were hopeful. Robert immersed himself in physical rehabilitation during the ensuing months and years. He acquired the ability to walk with prosthetics. He secured employment as a counselor for fellow veterans suffering from the psychological and bodily effects of war. He created a new life that was significant and purposeful, but it wasn't the one he had intended. In his house, Robert kept Elvis's scarf in a display case. After that night, he gazed at it frequently but never wore it again. It brought to memory a time when someone he looked up to had recognized and respected his sacrifice. He was reminded that he was important. The veteran community in Houston began to hear about what had happened that evening. When other injured warriors learned about it, they contacted Robert. Some asked him to speak with them on healing and discovering meaning in life after an injury. Robert began going to support groups for veterans, telling his tale, giving him the same respect and acknowledgement that Elvis had given him. Robert consistently brought up the concert when he was questioned years later about his recuperation and how he had managed to go on despite losing his legs. He would say, "Elvis Presley saluted me. My devotion was recognized by the rock and roll king. He did this to remind me that I was still a man and a soldier, worthwhile, even without my legs. I was saved by that moment." Elvis never discussed the incident in public. Calling attention to such instances was not his style. However, some close to Elvis claimed that it had a significant impact on him. Due in part to his personal experience in the military, he had always appreciated military duty, because his father had served in the army. However, something about the price of war and the significance of remembering those who suffered for it seemed to solidify for Elvis during his encounter with Robert. For the fans who were present that evening and saw Elvis and Robert exchange salutes, it became one of those tales they would tell for the rest of their lives. I was present. Elvis gave a wounded veteran a salute that evening. You could sense the appreciation, respect, and recognition of the sacrifice. It was among the most impactful concert experiences I've ever had. We are reminded that acknowledgement is important by the tale of Elvis and Master Sergeant Robert Hayes. That recognizing the sacrifice made by someone, it has genuine power when it comes to someone's suffering or service. Elvis could have just carried on with his show. He may have waved casually or disregarded Robert's salute. Rather, he halted. He nodded. He showed honor. And by doing so, he provided a wounded veteran with something. He was in dire need. Confirmation that he was seen, that his sacrifice mattered, and that he was valuable. Seeing someone, acknowledging their experiences, and showing respect might sometimes be the most impactful thing we can do for them. Elvis had an innate understanding of that. Additionally, on a November, that evening in 1970, he presented that present to a man in dire need of it.